Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityormamritam gamaya aviramaedhi Rudrayate dakshinangamukam te namam pahi nityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Spiritual qualities, of which, of course, there are many, but today the emphasis is on fearlessness. And one excellent way of beginning is some of the verses of the Viveka Chudamani. Viveka means discrimination in the sense of discernment. And a chuda is the crest, money is a jewel. So the crest jewel of discrimination. It was written by Shankaracharya and gives an outline especially of the things that one should do or should undertake in order to achieve spiritual understanding, spiritual insight, spiritual illumination. And in the beginning, in the among the first verses after a general introduction, the exclamation is made, Ma bhaishta vidwan stavanaschyapayaha. Ma means do not, bhaishta, do not fear. Fear not. Ma bhaishta vidwan. Vidwan means someone vid who knows. A knower, a wise person. O wise person, O learned one, do not fear. Why should you not fear? Nastya apaya. Na asti apaya. There is no apai, there's no going down, there's no going away, there's no decrease, there's no death for you. Ma bhaishta vidwan stavanaschyapayaha. There is no death for you. Fear not, O learned one, there is no death for you. Samsara sindho, that means the sindha, the ocean of samsara, the ocean in which everyone is involved, in which we live and move and have our being, or seem to live and move and have our being within something, and that something is a process of going round and round. And it doesn't have any apparent end, nor does it have any apparent beginning. It is, like they say, ka pushpa, it is like a flower in the sky. A flower in the sky doesn't have any roots. You don't know where it comes from. You see it, it is an apparition, it is probably a misapprehension, but you think you're seeing a flower in the sky. which is an impossibility because flowers don't grow in the sky, to the best of our knowledge. Although now in this 21st century, who knows what can happen. Flowers may even grow in the sky. But anyway, when they were considering things in a less technological era, this was the idea. Samsara sindho stupaya. So upaya, there is a means of going beyond this ocean of samsara, this ocean of coming and going. Normally we are only coming to this world and we eventually will go, so it doesn't seem like a circular process. But if one thinks about it, and if one studies some of the thought of the Orient, one finds that really speaking, there must be a coming back and a going again and a coming back again. We have not finished our job here. We've started, we have some purpose, we accomplish a few things, and then we majestically walk off this mortal plane, and that cannot be the end of it, because we have a lot of unfinished business. Our whole life is a beginning, and there doesn't seem to be any end to it. But if we think about it also, really there's no beginning, because we come equipped with a lot of things. And those things that we're equipped with, we have no way of understanding how we got them. How did we come established with such talents? How was it that Mozart at the age of 5 could compose a beautiful piece of music? It just flowed out of him. Where did it come from? So if you think of this, and if you have some acquaintance with the thought of some of the other areas of this world, you will have come across the idea of reincarnation. That whatever we have not finished now, we are born again to make another attempt to achieve what we were not able to accomplish previously. So it is a going around samsara sindhu. This is an ocean in which sometimes we come to the surface and we paddle around on the surface for a while, and then we go down again and come up again on another surface and paddle around some more. Eventually we hope to get to a destination that is going to be satisfying for us. But this Vivekachudamani Sri Shankaracharya makes his statement that in this coming and going, there is a way, Tarana, there is a way to come out of this upaya. There is a means for coming out of this. Yenaiva yata yatayosya param tameva margam tavanirdishami. So that marga, that tameva nirdishami, I will show you. Or I am showing you, actually. The verb is in the present tense. I am showing you this. I am, my very instruction is the means, or is a path, a means for achieving this, that achieving that path that the great sages of the past who have succeeded in unraveling the mystery of this existence, they have left a trail, they've left instructions, they've left a path. So there is a way. In other words, the fear that we have of the unknown is our basic fear. We are here now, and after some time we will not be here. We all know that. No one has escaped that fate yet, and there's absolutely no reason for thinking that we alone will be able to escape it. And that is what gives fear. We don't know where we come from. We don't know where we are going. And that is the cause, the real cause of fear. Any other fear is manageable. Somehow the things that happen in this life that make us fearful, we can somehow deal with. And but this basic difficulty is the real problem. Then Vivekachudamani Sri Shankara goes on to say, Yenaiva yata, that very same path, yatayosya param, that these people who traveled it and reached the goal, reached the end of it, tameva margam tava nirdishami, that same path I am showing you right now. And that is the cause, that is the cause of fearlessness. Because the basic fear is not the fear of ordinary things, the fear of not having enough of this or that, the fear of getting into some sort of difficulty, all of those things. We have established quite a network to help us deal with these things. And so it is a fear, but it is not a fundamental, it is not an existential fear. But the existential fear is that we're here now and after some time we will not be. And the whole purpose of this life will not have been understood, much less achieved. So this is the heart of the spiritual quest, is this very thing, to obtain that fearlessness, to obtain an understanding, if not a realization, of the fact that that we're on a path. This is not a circle. This is a path that leads to a goal. And we can hasten our progress along this path, or we can slow it down. But in any case, we are on that path. That is unchangeable, unavoidable, eternal good news. Gospel, the gospel means the good news, and that is the good news that Jesus gave in his gospel. That is the good news that we're also, when we celebrate Sri Ramakrishna as one of the modern exponents of that ancient philosophy, the Sanatana Dharma, the infinite, eternal philosophy. That is what we are saying, that these saviors, they save us. They cannot save the body will have to go. But they tell us that we're on a path and we're headed to the goal, and ultimately we have nothing to fear because we are headed toward infinity, eternity, wisdom, all of the ultimately significant and magnificent things you want to describe. We are on that path. We're already on that path. No matter how we live in this world, no matter what happens to us, everyone is on that path. There is no, the reality of it is that, really speaking, there is no other path. You cannot avoid being on the path to your own fulfillment, because no other path exists. That is the real gospel. That is the real good news. that this universe that we perceive as being good for a while and then problematic in the long run, because we don't know where we are on that path, or that there is a path at all. That view of the universe is only because our glasses are covered with a concealing layer that doesn't allow us to see what's really here. And the people who have reached that level of understanding, the wise people, the people whom we honor as having achieved insight and realization, this is what they describe as having found. That the reality is, everything that surrounds us is really the reality. We're not quite seeing it that way. We have to clarify our view. We have to clarify our understanding. But there is no basic problem. That is the good news. That is what should bring that fearlessness, which is the subject of this morning. So that is the first verse in this. It's actually verse number 43 in this book, Viveka Chudamani. So then he goes on to say in verse 44, Astupayo Mahan, there is a means, Mahan, a great, there is a great means, there is a magnificent path. Kaschit samsara bhaya nashaha, nashaha, the destruction of bhaya, of fear, of samsara. That is our basic fear. That we're going round and round, and actually if we were obviously reaching somewhere by going round and round, we wouldn't feel so desperate about it. But we do not know. We are as though going round and round and actually ascending in a spiral to a goal, but all we're seeing is the going round and round. So, but Shankaracharya makes a statement, asti there is, upaya there is a means, mahan, a great means, kaschit samsara bhaya nashaha, by which we can destroy this fear, we can eliminate this fear. Tena tirtva, having walked along this same path by means of this, bhavam bodhim, the ocean of existence, this ocean of existence, having crossed this ocean of existence using this path, Paramanandam apsyasi, you will attain supreme bliss. So, it is a question of realization, it is a question of understanding. And the result of that understanding is that which interferes with what is very natural here is removed. What is very natural here is Paramananda, the supreme ananda, the supreme joy. That is our natural state. It is nothing that we have to attain. What we have to do is to remove the obstacles that keep that from manifesting. And what is the means? There are many different means, but what is one way of expressing it? And then the Vedanta Artha Vichara, that means the discrimination about the truths that are taught in the Vedas. Vedanta means the end of the Vedas. the Upanishad, the truths of the Upanishads. The Upanishads are the scriptures that are the record of those who have traveled this path and attained this goal, and what they have actually experienced and how they reached the goal. Vedanta artha vicharena jayate jnanamuttamam. The supreme knowledge comes from a deep study and deep practice of these basic truths found in the Upanishads. So the Upanishads are like a menu, you could say, or a map of the road, a map of the territory. By looking at that map, you still have not seen the territory, but you've seen the way to reach it, and you've gotten an idea of what that goal, the outlines of that goal. So and after that, as a result of that, tena atyantika samsara dukkhanasho bhavatyanu. So after that study, after that practice, after that development along of following these basic truths, that fear of samsara, that fear of going round and round disappears. And that is the good news. So then he goes on, he goes on to say, explain those means further. Adau nitya nitya vastu viveka pariganyate. So it is said that the first means, he actually gives 4 basic categories to achieve this. Nitya, nitya, vastu, viveka. Viveka means the discernment, the discrimination of nitya and anitya. These are the means of reaching that, of obtaining it, that we're describing now. What is nitya and what is anitya? That is the thing that has to be understood in our life. That is probably the only real thing that has to be understood, because once we understand it, not only intellectually, but we deeply feel its reality, then the rest becomes an easier path, an easier approach. Nitya, nitya, vastu, viveka. So what is it that is permanent and what is it that is eternal? That is the basic thing. So Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, was actually asked to assume that name by some of the people, some of the devotees that he met on his tour through India, because he had chosen other names. Sannyasins generally are not very particular about their names, because they're trying to go beyond name and form and reach the essence. So, but some name has to be there, because you can't say, hey, you, to everybody. You need some distinguishing characteristics. So, Swamiji assumed many names. Vividishananda was one. Vividisha means desiring to learn. Very humbly, although he had experienced the highest state, very humbly he called himself Vividishananda for some time. A sannyasin who is desirous of attaining the goal. Although even before Sri Ramakrishna had passed away, he had experienced the highest experience, the highest samadhi. And then he used to change his name also as he walked from place to place throughout India. He went from the north down to the south, and but then the Maharaja of Khetri, when Swamiji was on his way to America, said, "No, Swamiji, you should change your name. Your Vividisha Kala, your time for discrimination is long gone. You're way beyond that. So you should choose another name." So the name that Swamiji went by then was Vivekananda, and that is how we know him now. So Viveka, but Viveka is really what he taught, because Viveka is what we're talking about here, this discrimination. That is, if one can discriminate that is the basic quality of spiritual life that will bring this idea of eternity and infinity, which is the antidote to all fear. And the Viveka, this Viveka is that basic thing that says, what is it that is eternal here? And what is it that is transitory? Is there any such thing that's eternal? Normally we think nothing can be eternal because everything has come into existence and everything will go out of existence. But there's one thing that has never come into existence, and hence it can never go out of existence. That is reality itself. The screen on which we see the events of our life. That has never come into existence and can never go. And in our own existence, our consciousness of it changes. When we go to sleep at night, we don't see it anymore either. But the basic reality of it has not changed. It is our consciousness that is sometimes is aware of a little bit of it and sometimes is not. But deep down, that consciousness is at the very heart of our existence. That there is something here which is eternal. There is a reality which has never come into existence. It always was and can never go out of existence because it was never created. There's no mechanism for destroying that which was never created. That is the ultimate science, you could say. The ultimate wisdom and the ultimate science is to recognize that the very existence of all of creation presupposes something which was never created. And that is the basic truth of Vedanta. In that basic truth we give it different names. We call it Brahman, we call it Atman. But those are just names that we give to it. But the important thing is that such a reality exists. It's because we don't see that reality, that's why we have fear. We're afraid we're going to die, we're afraid we're going to disappear, we're afraid of this or that. But basically we're neither going to die nor to disappear. This is explained by Sri Krishna at the very beginning of the Gita, one of the most, you could say one of the most astounding verses of the Gita, but it's the start of the teaching, and also refers to the end of the teaching, which I will go into in a minute. The first teaching verse of the Gita is Natvevaham jatu nasam. It is not, Arjuna is telling Arjuna, Krishna is telling Arjuna, it is not that ever I was non-existence. Not to eva aham jatu nasam, ever nasam, non-existent. It is not that I was ever non-existent. In other words, I have always existed. That would be fine, okay, for an incarnation of God. For God, you could say, all right, God has always existed. But then he goes on to say the very astounding things, that this is also true for you. Natvam neme na ime janadhipaha. They're standing on the battlefield before the beginning of the battle, and they're watching all these kings that are leading their armies and before the battle of Kurukshetra. And Arjuna is despairing that all these people are going to die, and he'll be instrumental in causing their death. And so he says, it is better that I should give up everything and forget about this, walk away from this battle. There are several 100,000 people have assembled on this battlefield, and they're going to have it out. They're getting ready. And as soon as they blow their conches challenging each other, they'll have at each other hammer and tongs. But Arjuna sees all this and says, no, I don't want to have anything to do with this. But Sri Krishna understands the reason why. Because Arjuna did everything to avoid the battle, and he did everything to try to prove the necessity of that battle. There's a long history, which we're not going into here. But the point is that Arjuna saw all these people that would have to be killed in this battle, and he was unwilling to do this, even though everything, the other side had tremendously injured their side. It was, there were tremendous mistakes or misdoings or misbehavings or terrible things that had been done, and so they wanted to stop this from happening. And so that was the purpose of why they had met on this battlefield. But Arjuna says, no, all right, let all these things happen. I don't want to be instrumental. These people are going to die. So I don't want to be instrumental in this. But he did everything to make this, to become the instrument. And all the people that he was protecting from these rascals who were on the opposite side, these ne'er-do-wells on the other side, who had to be stopped. In some way or other, they had to be stopped. And but he said, no, I'll just walk away from this whole thing. Because he thought these people are going to die, I don't want to be instrumental. But these people were ready to kill him. That is the other aspect of it. But that's just the history of the event. But the point was, Sri Krishna tells him, it is not true that I never existed, nor is it true that ever in the past that any of you did not exist. It is not something, it is not a question of that any of us are going to be killed now, and it is not a question that we have ever been killed. The basic reality of us is that infinite wisdom, that infinity that is at the very heart of everything. So this was in the first verse. Then Sri Krishna says, "It is not a fact that that any time I was non-existent." In other words, it isn't the fact that I was just born now, and any of these were just born. It is not a fact that we're going to die, that we're going to disappear. That which comes into being and that which disappears is not the essence of ourselves. It is an important aspect that we have to deal with while we are alive, and we have to very carefully deal with it. But we don't come from nothing and we don't go to nothing. That is the very first thing. It is not that we ever were not existent. We were always existing. Every one of us is, by our very nature, existence itself. So this is the basic position, that basic philosophy that we're trying to explain. There is no, our basic fear is destruction, disappearance. The point is that the surface reality has come. At one time it was born, at another time it will die. But the essence that is the real heart of the human being or the animal or of any appearance, what is at the very core, the very center reality, has never come into existence. And because it never came into existence, it can never be destroyed. So the whole purpose of religion is to find that within us, which was never born and therefore can never disappear. And that is the divine reality within us. That is God. That is the infinite, the eternal. That is our very nature. At the very core of our being is that consciousness, that divine consciousness is in our very heart. It is something that we are aware of at all times. It is that which is really the source of energy in our life. If there were nothing of that sort, even ordinary life would become extremely difficult, or you could say even impossible. It is because we feel the existence within ourselves of something permanent that this whole life assumes a sense of permanency, because otherwise it doesn't have it. So that is the reason for fearlessness. It's not that the transitory will no longer be transitory and we'll be able to enjoy it forever. Because if we're talking about the transitory, some of it is not at all enjoyable. So if we take the enjoyable transitory, we also have to take the non-enjoyable. And there we have certain objections. We don't want that. We want the one but not the other. So if we take the one, we have to take the other also. But there is within us something, a reality which has always been the very heart, the very core of all existence, of all knowledge, of all experience. At the heart of every one of our experiences is something that has never come and will therefore never go. And that is the basic message of all these scriptures. So, but we can talk about it in more detail as to the means for trying to realize that. But we do have to remember that all these means, all these practices of, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga, jnana yoga, the four main yogas, which are the paths to the realization of the infinite. The basic thing we have to remember is that we're removing an obstacle. We're not creating anything. That reality, that infinity, that eternity is our very nature. When this body goes, we have the idea that after another existence will come. Sri Krishna details that in the Bhagavad Gita very clearly. But there is something which has never come and which will never go. And one of the ways of reaching that, of experiencing that, which is the real cause of fearlessness, to get evidence of that, it's not a question of philosophically believing its existence, actually experiencing it, in a very definite way. Because an indefinite experience of that fearlessness we have all the time. It's really at the core of our experience of duality. The reason for our experience of duality, the reason that we experience this world at all, is because there is something in us which is eternal, which is unchanging. If you're sitting in a train and there's on a track and there's another train nearby, you see the two trains relatively moving, but you don't know which one is actually moving. One could be stationary and the other one moving. One could be moving forward and the other one moving backward. You have no idea. You cannot discriminate what is happening. This is our present condition. We're seeing the world, we're seeing our life, all experience, and we do not know anything, we do not see anything permanent here. All we see is the relative, like two trains moving relation to each other in a station. I don't know, of course, nowadays people don't ride trains that much, but if you sit at a station and there's another train on another track nearby, that a very strange feeling arises. You know, which one of the two is moving? Because when a train starts to move, it moves so slowly that it accelerates so slowly that you really don't know which of the two is moving. So this is our present position. We think we're very stable, and this is me, and this world is going around me in so many ways. But actually what is happening is both of them are moving. We're not acquainted with anything steady. We're not acquainted with anything unchangeable. All we see is relative change, and the whole process is to go beyond that relativity. So, Shankaracharya goes on to explain, the path to reaching that. Adao nitya nitya vastu vivekah pariganyate. Pariganyate means this is fully described. This means to attaining this fearlessness, to attaining this sense of immortality, of the reality of immortality, which is what eliminates the sense of fear, is to discriminate between the eternal and the non-eternal, nitya and anitya. The discrimination, viveka, between the eternal and the non-eternal. So once you find the eternal, once you find that everything that is changing has at its background something that does not change, then the idea is to let go of that which is changing, because we're clinging so desperately to the changing that we're not even interested in the unchanging, or if we are interested, it's in a very superficial way. So it's only by letting go of the change, that which changes. We need the changing in order to support our changing bodies and minds. Yes, we need the changing. But if we don't perceive at the heart of that change, if we don't perceive that which never changes, we will always be going after only the changing, and as a result we will not perceive the unchanging. So the idea is, first let us acknowledge first. There is a nitya and there is an anitya. There is an eternal and there is a non-eternal. So the discrimination, viveka, adao nitya nitya vastu viveka pariganyate, it is said that at the first step in this discipline, which will get us beyond fear, which will show us the unchanging, which is the source of fearlessness, is to understand, to be able to discriminate between that which changes and that which does not change. So how do we perceive that which does not change? And that is the method of these four yogas. Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga. The idea is simply that in each of these yogas, the idea is to sift sift through the non-eternal and discover at the heart of it the eternal. So in Jnana Yoga, this is obviously to see the one in the many. In Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion, our thought, our purpose, our practice is to concentrate on God, the Supreme Spirit. Now, what is the definition of God? So many different versions are there. So many different ways of approaching the divinity, of approaching God. But the basic idea of God, the basic description of God, which would work through all different religions, is God is that which never changes. The eternal, the perfect, the pure, the reality that remains in the midst of all the things that do not remain, the things that come and go. And that reality in the Upanishads is described in various ways as Sat, as existence. Sadeva Somya Idam Agra Asit. Sat alone is in the beginning, before the manifestation of anything, or at the heart of everything that is manifested, is the idea of existence. Existence itself, consciousness, chit, and bliss or joy. So, where does that bliss or joy come from? The bliss or joy, this ananda, is all that there is. There is nothing but bliss. There's nothing but joy. When we get bliss out of limited things, it is because we are seeing a little bit of that eternal, we are allowing a little bit of that eternal bliss to percolate through that which is changing and which is limited and which is transitory. And we say, oh, this is wonderful. I had a wonderful meal, or I had a wonderful experience of this, that, or the other. And what we see in a painting, what we see in a poem, what we see in a grand piece of music is we perceive something which is not at the surface of our mind, which is not something that we think about. If we have to think about a piece of music, then it becomes a music theory. It becomes a question of scales and meter and all of this. It is just an intellectual analysis, and it may be intellectually satisfying, but it is not deeply moving. What is deeply moving in a piece of music or in a great poem is something that has nothing to do with the grammar or the language of it. It is a revelation that causes our mind to become extremely quiet for a moment. We're just surprised, we're just astounded, we're just, it is almost as though it's this aha moment. What is an aha moment? It is totally undescribable, otherwise it wouldn't be called aha. But it is that which we see something, and the infinity in it, the eternity in it, the indescribability in it is so overwhelming that our mind is just quieted for a moment, is just totally absorbed for a moment. And we feel the profundity of it because we've gotten in touch with a very profound aspect of our own natures. So this is, and the yogas are intended to do that. The paths of yoga are the methods that have been devised through the millennia to effectively cause that infinite to manifest through, to quieten the surface so that the depth is realized. In the Yoga Sutras, Chitta Vritti Nirodha is explained as the basic Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That is basically what we mean by yoga. So it is whatever that we can do to quieten that surface. If you look at the surface of a lake, you see, like, of course, I always think of Lake Tahoe, which is so beautiful and so colorful. The water is incredibly blue. And you just say, oh, this is a wonderful lake. This is a magnificent, oh, so inspiring. And we feel great. But the point is, the lake has nothing to do with it. Because we're not really seeing the lake at all. The lake is, I'm told, 1,500 feet deep in places. We're seeing nothing of that. We're seeing only what is reflected off the surface. So we're really seeing nothing that's in the lake at all. And, but when that water, when the wind that is blowing across the water actually stops, which it seldom does, but when it does actually stop, you can see great depths within the water. The water is so clear that you can see a long distance into the water. Every stone is clear, is visible on the bottom. So in that sense, Chitta Vritti Nirodha, when the vrittis, the waves that are present in our consciousness, that are constantly in our minds, the mind moving back and forth, thinking of this feeling, thinking, feeling, willing, remembering, all these things, everything is constantly coming up. The mind, there's a turbulence there, we're not able to see to its depth. When those waves stop, when that turbulence stops, we see that Satchidananda, we see that infinite joy that is at our heart. We see that infinite existence that is at the heart of everything. So this is this in a very brief context, very brief summary is what the quality of fearlessness and what we can actually hope to achieve in that way, and that what is the goal of our achievement. So we have a few minutes, so if there are any questions, we can discuss a few more things. Otherwise, I'll threaten you with going on for a few more minutes.
I do see hands up.
Okay.
Good morning, Swami Vedananda.
Yes. Namaskar.
I was wondering, since fearlessness is so intertwined with impermanence, that realizing that impermanence would be part of the stopping of these sine waves, these crests and troughs that you're referring to.
So, no, I didn't quite understand the question.
I was asking more about impermanence, and that realizing our impermanence is the path, is part of the path to samadhi, or to realizing our own we never didn't exist, and we will never cease to exist.
Yes, that is one view, but it's more on the negative side. On the positive side, that is what really we want to emphasize, because the positive side is what is really fruitful. In other words, it will attract our minds, and it's closer to the reality, because if the deeper truth were understood by simply negating multiplicity, then it would be very difficult to, to actually experience something positive out of that. The thing is, what the Upanishads describe, they don't describe it's not this is one of the paths, that is true. It is not this, it is not that, the path of negation. But saying not this is simply a prelude to a tremendous crescendo of it is this. Tattvamasi. You are that reality. In the Chandogya Upanishad, 8 times the teacher says to the student, you are that essence, that which is, the reality at the heart of everything that changes. The not this implies that there is a this. But it is indescribable. It is, in other words, it is not on the same level as the not this. But to say that nothing exists is a prelude. It's all right as such, but it's a prelude to the realization, the understanding. This Tattvamasi, you are that. I am Atma Brahma. This Atman, this inner reality is Brahman. So the realization is not at all negative. The negative aspect of it is only the taking the dust off the mirror. That is negative. I have to wipe the dust off the mirror. I'm going to throw the dust away, sure. But what remains is the mirror. So that is the positive aspect is what really grants fearlessness.
Thank you, Swami.
So I will assume that you have been cowed into silence, and no one is...
I did hear the beginnings of another question.
Oh, sure.
Would you please speak up again?
I guess you're referring to me, Mark. Good morning, Swamiji.
Good morning, Mark.
Yes. Like many seekers, I have a fondness for reading spiritual books, and I'm currently reading a book on the Upanishads by Swami Vedananda.
Yes.
Editor. And in his preface, he says, let's see, what does he say here? An aspirant who seeks liberation while dwelling in the body embraces the monastic life after renouncing the longing for offspring, wealth, and happiness of the heavenly world. Then he says, the man endowed with knowledge of the Atman attains peace. His bliss knows no bounds. His doubts are destroyed forever. He is the embodiment of fearlessness. This seems to imply to me that in order to attain total fearlessness, one needs to become a monastic. Is that true?
No, it's very helpful. It is extremely helpful, but it is not necessary. As an absolute necessity? Definitely not. I mean, the great sages of the Upanishads, many of them were householders, and they had, some of them were kings ruling empires. So this is not, monastic life is extremely helpful and beneficial, no doubt. And a monk would never say that monastic life is second to anything. Certainly not. But that is not, it's not a requirement. It's absolutely not a requirement. And you find that many householders have achieved a great deal of progress in that respect. And in fact, I have frequently talked to people who are raised in India who quote their grandmothers as being their magnificent source of inspiration, more than any other inspiration that might have come in their lives. So it is, and also the fact that there were 4 stages of life. So the student, the householder, the forest recluse, and the monk. So these 4 stages, none of them is said to be, say, unnecessary, or you can do without it. Generally, the purpose was to go through all these stages. And those who became monks, I mean, eventually, when people get very old, their family responsibilities are gone, then they spend their time in prayer and study, meditation, when they're, if they're inclined toward that. So, no, it's extremely helpful, but it's not at all necessary, I would say that. But for some people, it is a necessity in their own lives. In a private sense, they feel that nothing else will do for them what monastic life will do. On an individual basis, yes, that is definitely possible. But in an objective sense, no, it doesn't mean anything. In the Mahabharata, there is a story of the sannyasin who was taught the greatest truths by a butcher who was cutting meat in a public market, and then later on, this man gave a tremendous description of the ideal spiritual life. So, extremely helpful, but not absolutely essential, I would say.
Can I ask you one more thing, Swamiji?
Sure.
This morning on YouTube, from the Vedanta Center in Bangalore, India, they were speaking from a book called Leela Prasanga. I had never heard of that before. Are you familiar with that? It's about Ramakrishna.
Yeah, Leela Prasanga is I think that was the original title of the book by Swami Sardananda that is now being published. Swami Chaitanananda has translated it again. It was originally translated, I think, probably in the maybe 1930s, I don't know. Anyway, it was called Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master. And then Swami Chaitanananda has translated it again within the last few years. It was originally written in Bengali by Swami Sardananda, who was the General Secretary of our order, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. And so it is it's an extremely magnificent book, and shows in detail Sri Ramakrishna's life, the life of a supreme knower of Brahman, how he attained that, his training, his life, his what he did afterwards, how he taught his disciples. It's a wonderful book.
Thank you.
Yes, so absolute silence is a good thing at the end of a discussion of fearlessness. Absolute silence is his name, is one of the statements. So thank you very much. Namaskar. Antariksham shanti, prithivi shanti, apo shanti, rosharaya shanti, vanaspataya shanti, vishve deva shanti, brahma shanti, sarvam shanti, Shantireva shanti same shantiredhi. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. The herbs, the plants, and the trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. Everything in the universe is pervaded by peace. May that infinite universal peace enter our soul and being. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you for your own fearlessness as well.
Hari Om, Hari Om.